Welcome back to the PricePlow podcast. Today is a special episode. I'm super excited to talk with PLT today. Steve, Jeremy, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I want to do a quick introduction on who you guys are, but also a lot of this episode is talking about who PLT is. So for a little bit of background, it's August 20th, 2024. Earlier this year, we met you guys at Expo West, where we got to sit down and talk about all the wonderful ingredients that PLT makes and markets and distributes. Over the last few years, people have enjoyed a lot of content on your various ingredients that we've talked about. But today's really the first time we're going to talk about the company overall. So, guys, thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll start with Steve. You want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your time at PLT?
Sure. I'm Steve Fink, the Vice President of Marketing. I've been with PLT about just about 9 years now. My background, I'm actually an attorney by trade. I pivoted out of the law. I guess you could say I'm a refugee. I spent a number of years in the industry in amino acids first, and then made the move over to PLT. And it's one of the best things that I can do. These kind of conversations, when we talk about just value and the impact that we make at the consumer level, the rigorous work that we go through in all of the aspects of marketing life, the science, the discovery of these solutions. It's really great. I'll let Jeremy introduce himself, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about PLT and kind of our DNA and ethos. And then I'm looking very much forward to the conversation.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having us on. I'm Jeremy Appleton. I'm the Director of Medical and Scientific Affairs at PLT, and I've been with the company now 5 years. I'm a naturopathic doctor by training. I've been doing that for the last 30 years approximately. And almost all of that time I've spent working in the natural products industry, emphasis on dietary supplements, scientific and regulatory affairs, product development. I've worked on both the ingredient side of things and also on the finished product side. So I have a lot of experience with understanding how products work, what the science is behind them, and being able to do, I guess you would describe it as technical marketing, but really talking to our customers about why our ingredients are different, and how the benefits and claims, things that we say about what they do are scientifically substantiated.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This is already shipping up to be interesting because I didn't know Steve was an attorney to start. When
Yeah.
when we talk about marketing, there's obviously a lot that many brands miss in terms of backing claims with quality data, but PLT provides a lot of the substantiation for the claims behind their ingredients. So a lot of consumers that listen to this are consumers that probably enjoy various ingredients from you guys in products that they purchase. But you guys are mentioning kind of technical marketing to your customers. Your direct customers really are brands, formulators, decision makers at companies who those things should matter to. So I'm expecting a little bit more of a technical discussion today, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be delivered from Jeremy on the science side and from my side on the marketing. One of the most important things from our perspective is when you're providing solutions to the market, you want to make sure that they will stand up to scrutiny. That means at the customer level, are they going to experience and feel the impact of these solutions? Are they going to stand up to the, let's call it the brand promise, the ingredient promise? And then from us, we enable claims on pack. That basically means we stand behind that rigorous research. The research that we conduct is going to adhere to very, very rigorous principles. The discovery of these solutions and the basically repeatability, that every batch that you're going to see is going to be consistent. These are things that come into play, and I think it makes a very big difference, and something that with this rich heritage, we've been basically in business for over roughly 75 years. And one of the things I think everybody that works here, we're very proud of the work that we do, and many of us consume a lot of the ingredients that we market and sell. It's kind of cool to be a part of that.
Well, it doesn't hurt when you, at trade shows at least, provide us with the gummies and some
Oh,
pretty nice
totally.
tasting drinks that are in your ingredients. So thanks for providing those for sure. In terms of like what we're going to talk about today, I think one of the better places to start is kind of through the content that we have already started producing. Our introduction to PLT Health Solutions, I'm going to say the whole company name just so we have it out there and everything, but our introduction was really with the ingredient Zynamite. And so I think that's pretty cool because it's kind of like a brain body ingredient. Correct me if, you feel free to talk about it yourself, but that's the way I see it. And what I love about this ingredient is that it focuses on these two different areas that we are trying to pull together as people who are athletes, trying to stay focused and not like fall apart after a training session or workout or competition or anything. And Zynamite seems like the perfect place for us to have started, but you have a whole lot of other stuff. And it seems like you've also seen the future with beverage stable ingredients. And so I'd like to get into that as well. But I think it's like your cognitive stack really that I get excited about, even though you have a lot of anti-aging stuff, like your site has a lot of stuff on it. So, and it's plthealth.com for people who are listening. But let's talk about Zynamite first, and then kind of parlay that into like some of the cognitive sphere and how it might help our bodies as well.
Absolutely. Jeremy, you want to take a swing at
Yeah,
the product?
I will because Zynamite is actually the ingredient that I cut my teeth on at PLT as well. When I first joined the company, this was the new ingredient that was being launched. There was a lot of excitement around it. It was unusual amongst ingredients. Oftentimes, we'll launch an ingredient and it will be on the basis of one brand new study. Right? We've got a study. Now we're going to launch it. When Zynamite launched, I think it already had 5 or more published
Yep.
clinical trials. And then it very quickly, that number expanded to 7 or 8, I think we're at now.
We're north of that. I think we actually have more, but
Yeah,
yeah.
well, 10 if you count multiple studies that are talked about within a single publication. Because sometimes the publication will say, okay, well, in study 1 we did this, and in study 2 we did that. So we have 4, 8, 10. Well, I think there's 10 publications. There's also a really great review article published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology for people who are trying to understand the traditional use of this ingredient. So Zynamite is a mango leaf extract. So people are familiar with mango because they've eaten the fruit, but they might not be aware of the fact that multiple parts of the mango tree have been used throughout history as both food and medicine. And this includes the leaves, which traditionally were, around in various countries eaten as part of a salad. There was a period of time in history where the leaves of mango, when there was either a shortage or an embargo on tea coming in from China, people would brew mango leaves and drink it as tea as an alternative. And so and this is the key constituent in mango leaves is something called mangaferrin. And mangaferrin's been studied extensively in the medical literature. It does a lot of things, and we're still trying to understand all the things that it does. But I think that one of the important features of it is that it imparts this energy. We call it mental energy. Sort of the ability and willingness to do cognitive work. And when you take Zynamite, it's a very experiential ingredient. So when you've had it, and this constituent mangaferrin turns up in, from an ethnobotanical perspective, it turns up in plants that have been used as hunting tonics and morning drinks. So it's not unusual or unexpected to find that people might have been consuming this leaf as a kind of I wouldn't say stimulant, because it's not a stimulant in the way that caffeine is, and it's working by different types of different mechanisms. But it is doing, like, it's improving the delivery of oxygen to the brain and to the muscles. And so when we talk about brain and body, and we look at the research on Zynamite, we see that there are cognitive effects. Usually that's a higher dose. And then Zynamite's been studied in combination with a lot of other ingredients, which is sort of unusual because we usually have, our ingredients studied, just look at them on their own, and then we leave it to our customers to do the combining. But in this case, there was a lot of really interesting exploration of, well, what would Zynamite do if you combined it with quercetin or with luteolin or with, tiger nut, which is this kind of root vegetable that they eat in Spain, where this was coming from. And so there's a tremendous amount of interesting insights about how you can use Zynamite both cognitively and in a sports context. And so that's where the research has been, a lot of it in sport, a lot of that increasing power, increasing, resistance against muscle fatigue, improving sports recovery, faster reaction times, and things like this. So yeah, it's super interesting ingredient, and not like any other that you're really going to see in the botanical arena.
Yeah, I'd also add even what really drew us to the solution is that you were able to impart this cognitive pathway towards energy in a non-stim context. So you had a lot of usage occasions that it really opened up the door where this could be combined with caffeine. It could be used in non-caffeine delivery forms. And so you were looking at this. That's what got us very excited. And it's been something that it's really been great to watch this thing grow over the last couple of years since we launched it.
So with Zynamite itself, it's not just like straight up mangaferin, but it is standardized to a certain amount of mangaferin? Or
That's right. It is mango leaf, so Mangifera indica leaf extract, and it is standardized to 60% or more mangaferin. So it's, more than half of it is mangaferin, and that's very high. It's much higher than the amount that if you were just to pick a leaf off of a mango tree. So it has been concentrated. But however, it is also generally recognized as safe. It's an ingredient that can safely be used in foods. And then it is also in what we would call an old dietary ingredient. So, mango leaf extract doesn't require any kind of new dietary ingredient notifications. It's just something that is, predates the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of '94. So it's grandfathered in. And yet there's, this really cutting edge, interesting research that on this unique and proprietary extract of mango leaf.
So, yeah, I'll have a few questions, but in terms of this, like, quote unquote mental energy, I liked when you said willingness to work, because sometimes like you need something. Can you give like some of the mechanisms of what's happening here? If it's not, obviously we know how caffeine works and everything.
Yeah.
And we want stuff to do, I mean, the goal, holy grail, is to do have very similar effects, but in different pathways that don't get you hooked and stuff.
Yeah, everybody wanted a caffeine replacement. And in fact, a lot of the early research on Zynamite was investigating it and talking about it as that. But as I mentioned, they do work by different pathways. So caffeine is going to work on adenosine receptors, and it kind of fools your body into thinking that it's not tired anymore. Not necessarily, totally beneficial. The mechanisms by which Zynamite work, there are a lot of potential mechanisms, but the one that the researchers have focused in on the most is catechol O methyltransferase inhibition, or COMT inhibition. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but it is thought to be responsible for some of the cognitive effects that the plant shows. And as an example of that kind of thing, what they've showed, what they did in the clinical testing, they would have people do, a battery of cognitive tests. Compass is the acronym that they use for it, and they have to do things like count backwards by 3s and 7s, and see how quickly people can do that, how much, with or versus placebo, right? Because you can do that, and if you're doing it over and over again, you can have some improvements. So you have to compare it to the placebo group to see if you're actually having an increase in that. And what was shown is after just a single dose of Zynamite, not taking it for a week or a month, taking one dose, people were able to have that improved calculation performance, improved accuracy of attention, accuracy of performance. They're very specific cognitive tasks that they were able to do in this university study after just one 300 milligram dose.
And that's a 300 milligram dose of Zynamite itself, right?
Zynamite itself, that's right.
Okay. So let's just say that's like roughly 200 milligrams of actual mangaferin. Maybe a question for Steve, the former lawyer or whatever. Let's say that out there, before Zynamite was a thing, there was a study on humans, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, all that randomized study showing that 200 milligrams of mangaferin itself imparted some effect. Are you able to make a claim on that study, using that study, knowing that it had the same amount of mangaferin that you have, but wasn't exactly Zynamite? Because there is a ton of there's a ton of mangaferin research out there, and a lot of safety research too. So that's what I'm kind of wondering.
Yeah, we will use the existence of those studies anecdotally, but one of the things that sets PLT apart is we study and base any type of research on the article of commerce that we are working with and that our customers are going to consume. So I won't get into the realm of borrowed science. I'll let Jeremy talk about that. There's a lot of that goes on, but I think that's what distinguishes us. Sure, we will look at the totality of the evidence out there. We will often talk about that in the context of at least understanding this is a well-studied ingredient. It's years of safety. It's been consumed in hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of doses or billions of doses over time. But when we talk about our particular standardization and our particular ingredient, our particular solution, any science claims or marketing language that we at PLT put out there is going to be based on the particular article of commerce that was studied. So we actually do enjoy when the industry at large gets behind an ingredient because it's good it moves the industry forward. However, we think it's very, very important that if you get behind an ingredient, it's got to be the article that said, because if you look at 60% standardization, there's an additional 40%, right?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
What that unstandardized 40% is can vary widely. Very widely.
Yeah, Steve is making you're stealing my thunder, man.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
No, you're spot on with that. I just want to chime in and agree that yes, you got 180 milligrams of mangaferin in that 300 milligram dose. You got 120 milligrams of the rest of that mango leaf extract. And botanicals are a complex entourage of active constituents. Mangaferin is arguably the most important one, right? And you can get a lot out of understanding the clinical research on mangaferin in terms of, hey, why do we think this is working? But to say that a pure mangaferin is equivalent to Zynamite, that would not be an accurate statement. And we would not extrapolate on the basis of that research to make claims on our ingredient, nor should anybody who is providing another mango leaf extract, if they are, they shouldn't base their claims on our research, because there are subtle differences and sometimes really massive differences between the so-called articles of commerce, right? And the actual stuff that Zynamite is, it's unique, it's patented, nobody else has it. And so the research that was done on it really only applies to Zynamite. The other thing I'll say is I'm not aware of anybody testing 180 milligrams of pure mangaferin in a clinical setting. I haven't seen many clinical trials on, pharmaceutical grade mangaferin. There's a lot of preclinical stuff. There's a lot of exploration, and there's some drug development going on of mangaferin but that's very different. I mean, you can take an extract of something and make a drug out of it, but you lose all of the other context of the phytobotanical context in which that ingredient occurs when you do it. So it really, in terms of assessing safety and toxicity, you can glean a lot of information from the mangaferin research, but they are in no way equivalent
Awesome.
in
Thanks
terms
for
of
answering that.
efficacy.
I guess okay. So we've talked about mangaferin and Zynamite in a nootropic context, but let's put our formulator hats on for a second and like, can we? Yes, we can. Is the answer? Put it into a pre-workout. Where is it? Where is it best used though? Like, let's say I'm a brand and I'm not going to put Zynamite in every. Unfortunately, I'm not going to put it in every product. Where would you like to place this ingredient in the overall stack? Do you think it could be better suited in a pre-workout, or like what? How would you formulate that kind of pre-workout?
We've had a lot of partners, commercial partners that have put this in a pre-workout, even in focus blends. This is an ingredient because, as Jeremy said, it's an acute reaction. So you don't need. It could be. It doesn't have to necessarily be in an everyday product. It could definitely be in a pre-workout. It can be in an all-day energy. It can go into energy blends. It can go into even post, because you're trying to. If you don't want that stim effect after you're done, you want to kind of stay focused and have your mind honed in on what the day is bringing, but you don't want that, want that kick after. It could certainly go in to a post workout or a recovery. So that's what gives it a lot of flexibility in terms of a solution based on its makeup. So we've seen it used in all of those different use cases.
One thing that I would also add to that is that Zynamite is at 300 milligrams per day is what has been studied for its cognitive effects, but a much lower dose of Zynamite in combination with quercetin is what's been shown in a sports context. So we look at those as different ingredients. The Zynamite plus quercetin ingredient is something we offer as Zynamite PX. And there is a unique synergy that occurs between Zynamite and quercetin that where the research is showing that it's having these effects on athletic performance, physical endurance, and so forth. So it really depends. We talk about brain and body effects of Zynamite, but those are really two they're both happening. If you take enough Zynamite to affect your brain, you're going to have some effects on body and vice versa. But I really see Zynamite at 300 milligrams per day as being a separate ingredient value proposition than Zynamite PX at 140 milligrams per day of Zynamite plus an equal amount of quercetin.
Yeah, one of the other things I'll add, Jeremy, maybe you can even talk to a little bit about this. As this ingredient, the pull into the market and the popularity grew, we started to get questions around, hey, we see opportunity in beverage formats or ready to mix solutions. Botanicals are notoriously challenging to work with in a beverage or ready to mix context. And so we ended up going back to the drawing board with our research partner. And we're now in kind of a second generation of Zynamite, which recently came to market. A number of things went into that research. One, we wanted to make this thing quite more water dispersible, water soluble, but at the same time, would that change the bioavailability threshold? And in fact, it did. And so that's something that offered a great opportunity from a formulator's standpoint. We're able to meet the rigorous challenges of sensory, but also offer a solution that was going to be friendly in the dosing and formulation hat. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, Jeremy.
I do. The great addition here, because we were talking about mangaferin versus mangaferin as it appears in the context of Zynamite. Mangaferin is very poorly bioavailable by itself. There are, constituents of the mango leaf that enhance its bioavailability, and even then, it wasn't. It wasn't, didn't have superior bioavailability. So through the formulation expertise of our ingredient supply partner, we were able to develop Zynamite S which was 3 times more bioavailable for mangaferrin. So you could reduce the dose by a third and still get the same amount of absorption of mangaferrin into the bloodstream as with the previous Zynamite. So that is, that's the kind of innovation that you get when you go with a branded article of commerce that has that kind of investment in the research, investment in the like a pharmacokinetic study like this one, and investment in continued improvement in the formulation.
Excellent. All right, so we don't have forever to. I want to get through some of the other cognitive ingredients, and you gentlemen have definitely passed the test in terms of you know what you're talking about. So let's. I think the question really is like, yeah, I want to talk about the whole cognitive platform, because that's where I've been really interested in PLT Health Solutions, and Zynamite kicks that off, but. You have a new ingredient called Vanizem. I'm not sure. I almost like want to call it dealer's choice. Like, what should we talk about next, or should we take a step back and talk about how you can improve? Obviously, there's a lot of like not just like focus issues going on, and blue light and problems, and mental health and everything. Like, there's a lot of issues, and a lot of people are looking for nootropic support. How is PLT Health able to like kind of broadly support the overall nootropic movement? And then, like, I guess dealer's choice in terms of how we cover that next.
Could I offer an idea on how we structure it?
Yeah,
man.
Last time we spoke with Steve, or I don't know if it was Sean who had it, but there was a graphic where there was a circle, and you guys split up cognition into like a calming state, an exciting state, because you have both Zembrin, which is a mood and calming, but then you also have Zoom XR, which is literally excitatory. Like, so if you guys could break it up in that way, I thought that was an awesome.
Yeah, and Jeremy, you can take a swing at how we segment the market. We really look at this kind of as from a macro standpoint, kind of quadrants of the cognitive space, and then within some of our solutions skirt based on the research, a couple of them. And Jeremy, why don't you talk about it, and then I'll maybe talk about the commercial implications and kind of just our commitment to kind of captaincy in that segment.
Yeah. And for those real quick, for those watching on YouTube, we do have a share button on this software. I'm not sure if you want to mess with that at this point, but if not, you send me that image and we could plop it on the screen.
We'll give it to you. So hopefully when this is live, we'll pop it up. Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I'll speak to that if people are able to look at it. That's great. The first thing that I would say to contextualize this is that these ingredients in this category, there is overlap, there's messiness, there is a little bit of an arbitrary sense of, well, what are we talking about here when we talk about cognition, right? I heard you mention nootropics, and nootropics are for sure an important aspect of the cognitive health platform. We have ingredients that are specifically targeted towards improving the performance of memory and focus and concentration, and reducing distractibility, and we can talk about those. Then we have sort of pivoting over next door to those. We have a whole we have ingredients that really more target maybe some cognition, but also mood, to be able to perform those cognitive tasks, but to do it in a less stressed out way. We have ingredients we can talk about there. And then that kind of flows into, stress, right? Stress is its own category. There's mental stress and emotional stress, but there's also like adrenal stress and needing that endurance and stamina, and then there's the stress that sort of keeps us awake at night, right? And calming. And then so you mentioned Vanizem, we get into that territory where, you have something that actually is working in this case on the endocannabinoid system. And so, and then we can keep going around the circle, but I think it's really helpful sometimes to understand how these ingredients are working. And sometimes, you can really get into the weeds with mechanisms of action. I'll tell you, with especially if I mentioned the endocannabinoid system. So, oh, well, really? That's how's that different from CBD or capsaicin, which are also both known to work in the endocannabinoid system? And it very quickly gets very complicated. You can't make easy generalizations. But since you mentioned Vanizem, and since it is a new ingredient for us, I'll just drop in there that this is a calming ingredient, and it's a mood lifting ingredient. So people, without feeling necessarily sedated or sleepy, they feel calmer, fewer anxious feelings. They do have better sleep quality as a result of taking it at 150 milligrams per day, especially. And they find it easier to fall asleep, easier to relax, and it's just it's a mood lifting ingredient. Um, I don't know what else, Steve, you want to chime in. I could go in the direction of Zembrin from there. I could go in the direction of
Yeah,
Cerazin from there, which are, you
yeah.
know,
It's funny that Jeremy brings this up. One of the things we do here at PLT is we make sure that all of these solutions, they kind of complement this cohesive approach to the cognitive space. So we look at the market, we look at pain points there, we talk to customers. Sometimes that informs a lot of the decisions we make on what we commercialize, how we design the clinicals. Jeremy talks about these. We might have solutions that might on the surface look like they're similar, but they approach they work very differently mechanistically. Um, Even from a calming standpoint, most of the solutions that we have in the calming space, they are very unique from one another. When you can take them, how they work, what they feel like, how they impart, Zembrin, Jeremy brought up. This is a kind of an alert serenity agreement. It's non-sedative. It kind of creates this serene feeling. It also imparts elements of focus. It's a very small dose. We've seen this commercialized in pre-workout formulas because a lot of times if you're committed to a very rigorous workout or you even have, whether it's gym anxiety or just the day can sometimes weigh down on you, just getting yourself into the zone. I got to work out. I've got to get myself, I've got to really focus on it. I've got to attack this. You have a lot of things that could come in and impact the way that you are. So we talk about this kind of keeping your brain in the game, whether this is in a competitive environment, whether you're memorizing lines for a speech you have to give later, studying for an exam. These things matter. And there are people like me, I'm trying to stay fit and focused, but I've also got to work all day. And when do you work out? When do you get active? And sometimes the day, the timing of that, whether this is an acute ingredient, whether this is something you have to take every day to have a cumulative effect, these things all come into play and they can impart different kinds of results. So we think about that. It's kind of, a lot of us are living the same life for the ingredients that we market and sell. So we understand, a lot of us, like Jeremy and I, we've sat on the customer, like what we'll call our customer, the B2B. We've been on the consumer facing side of the aisle. So we understand what they're looking for, wearing their hats. And we're consumers. At the end of the day, I'm a consumer of this industry too. So I think, I think everybody on this call probably is. We all, That's why we're in it.
Right.
It makes a very big difference, man.
I took some Zembrin mints before this podcast, so
There you go.
I love the like you said, it's a calm alertness. It's not sedating at all, but it is something that I could use later in the day. And I think that a lot of people are trying to find, especially a solution for that. Things that I know you sell a great extended release and delayed release caffeine, but what are ways that we can increase focus or alertness without having to deal with increased heart rate or blood pressure? So totally agreed.
Yeah, that's great. Great question. We have at least three or four ingredients that will improve focus without any caffeine like side symptoms. So you mentioned Zembrin, which is a really good example of where it has a calming effect, but is also you maintain focus, where it has you feel more serene and yet you are also alert. And that is a really unique balance that this ingredient provides. And it comes out of the clinical research on it. These are words that the consumers are describing the experience, but you can go to the clinical studies on Zembrin and you can see validated outcome measures that are showing basically the same thing. So for example, with Zembrin, a single dose, again, we have a couple of studies in which a single dose was given and then effects were measured 30 minutes later or 2 hours later. In the 2 hour study, they actually had people hooked up to MRIs and doing brain scans, and the amygdala, which is the part of the brain, kind of that what some people might call the reptilian brain, but that really primal part of the brain that responds to threat and stress, was kind of it was relaxed. The threat and stress response was attenuated after a single dose of Zembrin. And what that means is that because anxiety is kind of a hyper responsiveness to a perceived threat. If you have to get up and do public speaking, you're not actually being threatened. I mean, hopefully not. You're not actually in danger, but people get very nervous about it as if they were in some kind of in danger situation. And that's the amygdala lighting up and driving that kind of, I have to fight or flight kind of thing. And so Zembrin has been shown to kind of calm that response when it's induced, but it's not going to make you, it's not going to call, like if there was an actual threat to you, it wouldn't decrease your ability to deal with it, right? The other study that was really interesting that we didn't have anything to do with, but people have been looking at Zembrin independently of us, and they did a simulated public speaking task, and I found this interesting because that was always the example that I would give. It's like, oh, this would be the perfect thing. Imagine you have to get up and talk at your sister's wedding, and it's a special day and you want to show up for her, but you hate getting up in front of people, makes you so nervous. This would be the thing that you could take to keep your head on, remember the things that you want to say, and but feel calm while you're doing it. And they did an induced public speaking task, like an induced anxiety. And people that's right before you have to get up. That's when you feel the most anxious, that pre-stress period. Once you get going, you're usually okay. And that was where Zembrin had its biggest effect, was right in that moment when you needed it the most. So yeah, it's really interesting that you can have an ingredient with that sort of unique balance, because usually when people think of a calming ingredient, they're thinking of whatever, a valerian or something that's going to make you feel a little bit drowsy, and none of these ingredients do that in our platform. They Zembrin and Vanizem, both have Zembrin anecdotally and Vanizem actually in the research have been shown to improve sleep, but they don't improve sleep by making you sleepy, right? And then we have an ingredient that's specifically for restorative sleep, called Cerazin, and that works by a completely different mechanism. So we're trying to to hit it from multiple angles so that people can use and combine these ingredients in ways that are really custom tailored to what benefits they want their formula to deliver.
I think you brought up some really interesting points. Currently, in terms of educate consumers, there's a lot of consumers that know some of the, let's say, hallmarks of dietary supplements, but become very one-track minded on the pathways, if you'll forgive the pun, the pathways to these effects. If we talk about blood flow, everyone wants to compare it to citrulline. If you talk about endurance, everyone wants to compare it to beta-alanine. You talk about focus, everyone wants to compare it to alpha-GPC. But oftentimes, while maybe we can compare the effects, we are talking about a completely separate pathway that may work better for some individuals. Or in this case, if you compared Zembrin to alpha-GPC, you'd be really talking about a completely different kind of benefit, even though technically on a focus ingredient basis, we are talking about similar products.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of brands or consumers or users kind of confused about what we're talking about here, because there is no one ingredient fit for any goal, but your needs state or your that goal, it's much more nuanced, right? Are you speaking at your sister's wedding, or are you getting ready for a workout? There could be a difference there.
Oh, it's huge, right? And so any botanical extract, botanicals in particular. I mean, you say alpha GPC as an example. That's a single molecule, But if you take a botanical like Scaledium tortuosum, which is what Zembrin is derived from, or Rhodiola rosea, right? Um, those are uh, those botanical medicines have a complex entourage of constituents. They may be standardized to one or two things, but sometimes those standardizations are only marker compounds, right? They might only be a small percentage of what's present there, and then so the botanical is going to be acting through multiple constituents, affecting potentially multiple pathways. And those pathways are only the ones we know how to study. Those pathways are only the ones we've figured out. And the demonstrated clinical benefits are only those that we have validated instruments to measure. But all of that, it gives you a necessarily limited viewpoint of what a botanical is. So even like we got two ingredients, Nutricog and Synapsa. Okay, these two ingredients could not be more different from each other, right? One is Synapsa is Bacopa monnieri. Well, Ayurvedic botanical, well documented for cognitive improvement and so forth. Nutricog, also coming out of the Ayurvedic tradition, but it's Boswellia serrata and Terminalia chebula or Haritaki. These are completely different botanical constituents. Just so happens we have only so many cognitive tests we know how to perform that have been validated. So then, or we only know certain pathways that affect a particular neurotransmitter, like acetylcholine, right? Acetylcholine, important neurotransmitter for memory. It's not the only thing that's involved in memory, but we're going to look at it. And so the fact that both Nutricog and Synapsa affect acetylcholine, or the enzyme, acetylcholine esterase enzyme, and the fact that they both maybe come out of Ayurvedic tradition doesn't mean that they're the same. It doesn't even mean that they have the same mechanisms of action. It's just that that's how we are able to study and talk about them. So it's really, you have to get to know these ingredients intimately. Like there's 4 guys in this interview right now, right? We are not the same. We all have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, right? Some facial hair. I just shaved, so we could have also all had facial hair. How alike are we? We work in the same industry, right? We're having a conversation about the same thing. We are not the same, I guarantee you, when you get down to the details. So you have to get to know these plants intimately, and that's what we do by studying them, and then also by being able to develop a value proposition for them, to articulate that for customers, to find out what customers want in terms of a benefit area, and then to study that, and then to present it in a unique and compelling way.
I love this. This is making me realize, like, okay, we love to deal with single molecule ingredients and everything, but botanicals are a lot more fun. They're probably a bigger pain, but this is like it opens up a different world, and like what we don't know, we don't even know, kind of world. So it gets really exciting when you talk about the botanicals you're combining in a lot of these ingredients.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, because I if it's not the single molecule history, I came from amino acids. We were looking at BCAAs, we were looking at EAAs, they're well studied, well documented. But when you get into botanicals, it is a very, very different world. It evolves all the time. There are subtle differences that can make a world of difference, and that's what you get. It's nature, and essentially nature offering these wildly diverse solutions. And what we're talking about, everybody responds differently. That's why no 2 people are the same, and these solutions really open up a pretty big door.
You guys early in the conversation spoke about like consistency in extracts and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to open this up to you guys in any way of a tangent, but it seems like we enjoy tangents today. Have you ever dealt with like, weather, environment, all these sorts of things change.
Yeah.
But you're obviously still extracting and standardizing for a certain amount of like mangiferin here in this case. Yeah. But do the other constituents, do you ever deal with varying amounts of those?
This is really a great question. So
awesome.
and you headed sort of from a different angle, but you headed right in the direction where I was going. And I was going to talk about an ingredient of ours called Rhodiolife. So Rhodiolife is a Rhodiola rosea extract. And this happens to be a plant that grows in the Altai region of Siberia. Okay, and it's wild. So it grows wildly there, and it doesn't grow a lot of other places, right? There's different species of rhodiola. There's some that grow in China. Because it became somewhat overused, people love it, right? And to ensure consistent supply, people started to try to cultivate it. And there have been efforts at cultivation that have been going on for more than a decade. There was one group notoriously tried to grow it. They thought, oh, we can do a North American version. We can grow it in Alaska. And what they found was, even though it was the same genus and species of plant, what came out the other end, well, first of all, they didn't have a lot of success in growing it. And what they did grow did not have the same phytochemical fingerprint as the stuff that was natively growing in the Altai region of Siberia. So, the group that we've been working with developed a cultivation program in exactly the same region where it's wild harvested. And they have been the first to be successful at producing a cultivated material that has the same phytochemical fingerprint as the wild crafted material. Now, we're talking a standardization of 3 to 5% of rosavins and 1 to 1.5% salidrosides. So what's the other 90% of the stuff that's in there? It matters. It really matters. There's tyrosol, there's vitamin C, there's all kinds of constituents present in a rhodiola rosea but you can look at these things using HPLC or HPTLC. You can get a fingerprint. You can see where the peaks are. You can see how it compares with sort of the canonical material and how your extract compares to that. And when we have looked at Rhodiolife side by HPLC with other rhodiola extracts with the same standardizations, vastly different fingerprints. And so you cannot expect the same bioactivity coming from a material just because it has the same genus and species and because it's standardized to the same constituents.
I was thinking about this earlier.
Vastly different.
When you were talking about like a medicinal mangiferin and these things, like from two different areas or two different producers or two different extracts, you could have wildly different other 95%. That's interesting to me, and it was important to me that you mentioned like the consistency, because then a lot of people are going to ask, well, how often does PLT's Zynamite come out a different experience, right? Because there's obviously different batches, but you guys talking about consistency and the replication of these, I imagine sometimes the weather changes, and so different constituents are more readily available, but it doesn't change experience overall.
Well, you have to. This is very plant dependent. It's very environment dependent. But you're absolutely right that there are seasonal variations, there are climate variations, there are geographical variations, there are differences in soil, right? So many factors. Even at what time of year, what month, or maybe even what week you choose to harvest is going to affect what you get. And so if the people who then take those harvested plants and put them through all of the identification, the extraction, and the standardization, they have to have a level of expertise to be able to account for all of those variances to produce a product of extremely consistent, especially if it's not a cultivated product. Now, with something like Zembrin, we have seed to shelf cultivation, so there's it's a lot easier to control that. But with something where there's some wild harvesting going on of the plant, that becomes a little bit more challenging. And you have to, if you want something that's of, say, pharmaceutical grade quality, you have to be able to account for all those variants and really understand what it is in terms of features that you need to preserve, that you need to have present.
So I guess the challenge is, and this is, I guess, Steve's job, but like, your Rhodiolife label or a supplement label is going to say the same thing as some other like generic rhodiola. 1% salidroside, whatever, 3% rosifins.
Mhm.
So how do you educate and how do you get it across that yours is still going to be
Yeah.
a better, more experiential
That
effect?
that's we do podcasts.
And I'm having a blast on this, by the way. So you're doing a good job.
Yeah, no, and Jeremy brings it up. You know, you have in an industry that's notoriously replete with not bad actors or just you know, people that'll cut corners. You can really wreak havoc on the quality of an ingredient if you cut corners on just the stock, the source material, the extraction methodology, and Jeremy brought up fingerprint. He uses it all the time. There are very vast differences between the quality of various rhodiolas out there on the market versus what we have on the market also. And that's really where we cut our teeth also. There are all of those active constituents and those inactive constituents, the where we're getting it, how it's extracted, how it's stored, that kind of supply chain narrative is a very big thing for us. So, and I think some of that responsibility also, there are a lot of consumers that are going to make a choice on, are you purpose driven with your work? Jeremy brought it up. Very few companies have ever been able to successfully commercialize a cultivated commercial scale potent fingerprint of Rhodiola rosea as we have. It took a decade of work. We were actually, the irony is the work we did was years before whatever this wave of, hey, are you guys sustainable? We were doing it before there was an industry-wide call for it, because that was kind of in the DNA or the ethos of the company and the partners that we work with. I guess you could say some part lucky and some part ethos. It came together. We felt a responsibility to basically build around that component of the brand before it was something that I think if you don't do it, you're probably making a pretty big misstep. And luckily we built that entire platform years ago, so it's allowed us to be kind of at the helm a lot more than a lot of other companies that are now playing catch up or scrambling.
I think
So,
the strength for you guys right now is that trademarked or branded ingredients, whether or not they're patented, but having a brand name for an ingredient is a strong move right now on a marketing basis. People like catchy names, and if you have data to back it up, that is even better. You know, brands are moving away from, let's say, claims on the bottle, but it never hurts to have data to back claims when it comes to marketing, content, or just explaining what to expect from a product. So there's a lot of other strengths that I would say that helps out here, you know, as opposed to a generic rhodiola but at the very base of it, having a catchy name like Rhodiolife and some data to back it up is just a huge step above the competitors.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Ben, because the brand is not just a name, at least is where we're concerned. I mean, it's great to put a catchy name on something, but with PLT, our brand actually stands for something. People know who we are. When they get to know us, the companies that manufacture these products and they start to work with us, they realize, oh, these guys are. I ask for a spec, I get a spec. I ask for substantiation of claims, I get substantiation of claims. I got to know PLT before I worked for PLT, right? I was working as a director of scientific affairs for a major manufacturer of supplement brands. I don't know if I'm allowed to name them, but and PLT was a supplier of ours, but they weren't just a supplier. That was the point. There's a lot of ingredient suppliers out there. You can buy a commodity ingredient from any number of sources, but what came from PLT was something qualitatively different, which was added value, which was credibility, which was solid science, a whole package, and really compelling branding with claims that had been substantiated. So they, as a product developer, they were doing a lot of my work for me, made my job easier. And
Nice.
then we could start working together and collaborating at a higher level from day one versus me having to fight. I can't tell you how many times I had to fight with a company just to get basic information. A chromatogram that like we're talking about for Rhodiolife, that would be like pulling teeth with most companies. PLT was like, here, let us show you. we want to show you because a lot of companies, and this is a sad comment on our industry, but a lot of companies hide behind, fancy language that there's really no there. They hide behind, that there's like studies that are poorly designed, and they're pulling claims out of those that when you drill down into the materials and methods or statistical methods section, you find, that was actually not a statistically significant change. I can't believe what they just wrote about that. Or that change was only based on change from baseline. What about versus placebo? Why are you doing a placebo-controlled trial if you're not going to compare it to placebo? And there's little statistical, messing around that often goes unnoticed. And certainly we can't expect a consumer to have the sophistication to be able to read all the studies that these claims are based on. And so it boils down at some point to trust. The consumer's got to trust the brand, and there has to be a basis for that trust. And so, when you start talking to us and working with us, you realize that we care as much about that stuff as you do, maybe more in some cases.
We're just like you two. I mean, you're critical. You guys look at the industry and ingredients with a critical eye. We do the same thing even internally, and even when it comes to making decisions on innovation, if we're looking at new opportunities, Jeremy, we say no a lot. We just say it's not passing. Whether there's an enormous number of levers and pulleys and things that we say no, it's not. Check. Nope, kill, and it's over. But by the time it comes to market, it is passed through pretty rigorous decision process before it comes. And trust is we say trust builds brands. I think it builds brands with our customers, but it builds brands at the consumer level. I know what I feel like when I take something that's working. And I think you guys do too, and our customers know. And a lot of the customers, before they even onboard an ingredient, and we welcome it, they'll trial the ingredient. They want to feel it before. And that's what we stand behind, because we know that the efficacy is driving that. So it's built into the narrative of the brand. Not only the research, but it's got to work. It's got to work as promised.
I love it. It's almost like, a lot of these ingredients sound so interesting that it's almost like the conversation you want to have is, hey, I want to use these ingredients. I might just need some help in figuring out which exact product to put it in for to spread the love. You can't have all of them in one product. It'd be too expensive. That's kind of like where my head starts going is like, okay, how are we going to place these different things without making things overly costly and spreading it out. Just a little bit of housekeeping. One thing we hadn't mentioned, Zembrin is, I'm not, the pronunciation, Kana. It's a Kana extract, right? You mentioned the scientific name.
Yeah. Kana is what we would say is the standardized common name for Scaledium tortuosum, which is the Latin name or the botanical name. The problem with calling Zembrin Kana is because the common name Kana has become associated with a lot of not standardized or improperly standardized extracts of Kana. Zembrin is a unique cultivar. So when we talk about that fingerprint, right, that phytochemical fingerprint, the cultivated the balance of the active constituents in Zembrin is unique amongst other Kana. So we tend to not use that common name. We tend to go towards the branded name, especially with a product like Zembrin, because it is substantially different than other material that's commercially available that goes by the same name.
Got it. Okay. Sorry for mentioning that, but kind of glad I did in another way because it allows
great.
you to explain that. Okay.
It's great.
Gotcha. So I'm not sure how much time we have. I think we slotted another 30 minutes or so. You mentioned the endocannabinoid system. it's your new ingredient. I think we just got to go there, and I don't think we need a whole lesson on endocannabinoids. But I'm willing to take one. You guys clearly have the knowledge and everything. Can we get into the weeds on Vanizem a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, so Vanizem is comes from a plant or a seed called grains of paradise. So this is something that is used as a spice. It's got a gingery like flavor, and in fact, it belongs to the ginger family. And I mean the word family in a botanical sense, the Zingiberaceae family level that's above a genus and a species. And so the active constituent in Vanizem, or the constituent to which it is standardized, is something called 6-paradol. And structurally, it bears a resemblance to paradol resembles shogaol and gingerol, which are some of the active constituents, the pungent constituents that you'll find in ginger. Ginger and grains of paradise, and then most, originally capsaicin, which is from the red pepper, cayenne. These were that was the first one. Capsaicin was the first cannabinoid or first substance to be found to bind to the cannabinoid receptor. It was kind of how this whole the fact that we even have cannabinoid receptors in our brain was discovered. And so there's a couple of different kinds of cannabinoid receptors. There's CB1 and CB2, and they're kind of concentrated in different parts of the body. Some are more in the brain and nervous system. Others are more in the gut. They do slightly different things. People are familiar with the fact that cannabis constituents also interact with the endocannabinoid system, but maybe they know or maybe they don't know that like delta-9 THC doesn't produce the same effects as something like cannabidiol or CBD. It's because they're having a different type of impact on these receptors. And they can talk about an agonist effect versus an antagonist effect, right? So they can sort of stimulate the receptor a little bit, or they can prevent things from stimulating the receptor a little bit. And it gets very complicated after you go further into it, right? There's enzymes that like one called FAAH, fatty acid amide hydrolase, and this is an enzyme that if you inhibit it, you can have downstream effects on cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2. That's one of the things that Vanizem does. CBD also does it, but CBD and Vanizem, if you drill down even further, they have slightly differing effects, and so they're going to feel different. They'll both maybe be relaxing. They'll both maybe be, but in terms of how they might interact with the inflammation system or whatever, they're just going to have differential types of effects. Neither of those is particularly or is intoxicating in the way that a delta-9 THC is intoxicating. So you can't. It's very dangerous to characterize the endocannabinoid, this incredibly complex system, in just a few words. But what we can say is there are ways in which this system modulates anxiety, emotional stress. So we know that there can be relaxing effects here, sleep modulation, but also things like inflammation and so forth. So we know that some of the cannabinoids, from plants are anti-inflammatory as well. So it's operating Vanizem is operating within that universe. It's offering a unique benefit set, which we're just starting, and we've only got the one pilot clinical trial on it so far. We've got another one in planning now to try to. We've done some dose ranging effects, so we know 150 milligrams is kind of the ideal dose. 100 milligrams still works. 50 milligrams, you don't get quite as many of the benefits, as you would with a higher dose. So now that we've established that, we're trying to get a little bit more granular about what type of benefits this ingredient could deliver.
Okay, but right off the bat, you talked about grains of paradise and 6-paradol, which we
Yeah.
see in fat burning ingredients. 12.5% 6-paradol is a thermogenic. So
Yes, it is.
what's happening here? How is it different?
Yeah.
Or
So I would hesitate to characterize that as a fat burning ingredient. Just like think back to my not that it isn't. It does have some thermogenic effects, but just going back to the thing that I said earlier about ingredients are known by how we study them. And in the case of thermogenesis of 6-paradol, that was one research group published 2 papers on that. And because there's not a lot of other published clinical information on grains of paradise out there, there's a lot of traditional use, but there's not a lot of published clinicals on it. That's what people look at and they go, oh, this is what it's for. It's not what it's for. I mean, it's one thing that it does. So sure, if somebody took Vanizem, would they burn more calories at rest through a thermogenic process? Maybe. We haven't studied that because that's not what we're interested in. We're studying what we're really interested in, which is more aligned with the traditional uses of grains of paradise. You look at which is their effects on neurotransmitters, and one in particular called anandamide, right? So anandamide takes its name from the Sanskrit word ananda, meaning bliss, right? When people take grains of paradise, they have this experience. It's an experiential ingredient. And that's what it's traditionally been used for, as a spice, but also because it brings on these peaceful feelings. And we think that that's what we want to, that's where we're targeting our research. Now, this isn't a botanical with a complex entourage of phytoconstituents. Is Vanizem also thermogenic? Maybe. Does it also fight inflammation? Maybe. There's a lot of things in it and a lot of things it could do, but there's only so many research dollars we have to spend on really elaborating on this value proposition. And for us, the value proposition for Vanizem that is most exciting is mood and sleep. So that's where we're putting our focus.
very cool. So the effects, yeah. So the effects are more geared towards mood and sleep. The mechanism, it seems like, so you're inhibiting the FAAH, and then that upregulates anandamide, which then activates more CB1, which then gives you the central nervous system benefits. Is that like, am I tracing things properly?
That's a very a very excellent summary of a very complex set of reactions. But yes, that is what's happening. That's a good way of characterizing it. The FAAH inhibition increases anandamide, and then there's sort of indirect activation of CB2 and CB1 with the characteristic benefits that you would see in the central nervous system. On the other side of that of the equation, there's the activation of a transient receptor, a vanilla potential vanilloid receptor, or TRPV1. So when I talked about capsaicin was the first vanilloid that was really discovered. And so through this pathway, through this TRPV1 activation, then you're getting some other neurotransmitter activity that's considered desirable as well. So it's there's a lot going on there, right? And there are clearly going to be multiple mechanisms of action, but we're going to focus on the ones that make the most sense, backing up the benefits that we're trying to establish.
Right. Okay, Ben, I know you have something to say, but so it seems like PLT Health you love to talk about your own research, but you don't have a ton of research yet. What we do know, this is Mike at PricePlow talking, is that we know that increased anandamide, whether if you take it exogenously or find ways to endogenously produce more, which is what you're doing, is going to lead to the downstream effects, oftentimes, of feeling that bliss, better sleep, things like that. But I guess like you need to make the full connection is where things are heading, but you're still willing to sell the ingredient. In the meantime, you're just going to have like less stuff that could be written on a bottle, possibly.
Well, so, we base statements that go on the bottle, right? These structure function claims are always going to be based on the evidence that we have. They're not going to be based, and that evidence comes from clinical trials in humans, right? So we're not going to base it on research that somebody else did. We're not going to base it on preclinical research, like what we just described with anandamide. Okay, we know that we're inhibiting FAAH, we're increasing anandamide, and therefore CB1, CB2 effects, and therefore in the literature we know that that makes people feel X and such. We would never make a benefit statement for the end effect on the basis of those preclinical data. What was shown, that FAH inhibition, was a radioligand binding assay in a laboratory setting. That is not something that was shown inside of a human body. We know that's what's going on in the human body, but you have to do a clinical trial in humans, putting the stuff in their mouth compared to a placebo, and then seeing how it makes them feel using validated outcome measures. And that's what we would base the statements on that would ultimately make it to the bottle. Mechanisms of action are interesting, but they are not a proxy for demonstrated clinical effects in humans. Because you could have a theoretical mechanism of action. People talk about. No, I don't want to go down that road. I was going to talk about cartilage protection.
The other thing I'd add, Jeremy, is there are when you're ultimately in the lab and you're a branding team at the consumer facing level, you're going to make those decisions also, and you may look at the totality of evidence and some of the literature and find that the ingredient or the constituent ingredient offers this wide array of health benefits, and so there may be a decision made that they may pull that in. PLT, at least when we are marketing our ingredients, we're going to stay within the context of our studies, but we do have customers that will look not only at our body of evidence, but they'll look, as you're saying, Mike, of course, you should be able to pull from the literature, look at the totality of evidence, and then you'll decide what your brand promise is. And so, you know, that we're not here to stymie that. It's just more of what we do. It's how we get behind what we're doing.
And understanding how it works. I mean, we do wide literature searches, and clearly you've done your homework to understand anandamide and what it does in the human body, and that's fantastic context, you know, especially for an educated consumer who's trying to say, well, should I take this or should I take that? What kind of effect am I wanting to have? That's priceless information. So I sometimes, look through the eyes of a regulator, and helping our customers, who are the brands, reduce their risk, right? We don't want them to make statements, even though they may be true, if they're not rigorously substantiated according to the standards that the FDA and the FTC want to see. We say, yes, it probably does that, but don't say that on pack, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to have that double-blind study, or two, hopefully, to substantiate that language. But yeah, the mechanistic stuff is super informative for context.
I'd say that Mike and I operate from a very convenient place where we're allowed to say what we want about the constituents, right? We're not selling a product. So we sometimes get to take a much higher level viewpoint on what an ingredient is, what it contains. But I liked what you guys said early on. We were talking about, different mangaferin extracts could have completely different effects. And Jeremy, you slipped up at one point and you said that's not what this is for. And I love that discussion, because a lot of times we can say, well, that's not what this ingredient is for, but it becomes obviously a very philosophical discussion of like, what is this herb based on earth for, right? Like, what is this constituent really used for? And in so many different times, different users could use them for different things.
Absolutely.
But obviously it's PLT's choice to market it in a certain direction. And that's something that we've really loved about you guys, is that you guys really do a great job with your presentation and the branding around the ingredients, which very clearly displays this is what this ingredient is for. But then you'll always have your formulators in this industry. We love working with like Joey Savage will take an ingredient that is for fat burning and use it for sleep aid, right? Like there might be some crazy goal out there, some study where this one constituent did this wild thing, and they're totally able to use that. But to use your data, to use your claim set, to use your ingredients in the way that you guys present them, we love that.
You bring up a really great point. There are times also where the research that we embark on was informed by something like that. The industry moved in a direction, consumers started using it in a way, and it prompted us to say, you know what, that is ripe for research. We should check that out. That they may be onto something. And Zembrin was a prime example of that. When we went to market with Zembrin, we weren't even really targeting active nutrition or athletes at the time. They began using it and pulled it into that market and realized this is helping me focus better. My workouts are better. My performance is better. So it sometimes that can really make a big difference. Like you said, there are a lot of things that help change the life cycle, the direction of research, or the way that we look at it. We're totally market facing. We listen to you, our customers, and sometimes that can totally basically enable an entire research wing that we might not otherwise embarked upon.
Yeah.
Ironic,
and,
right?
I'm a naturopath, right? So I entered my career as somebody who studied botanical medicine at a deep level. So I look at mango leaf and mangoferin and I go, wow, man, that would be really great for a blood sugar formula. That would be really great if somebody's wanting to address GLP-1. Just because PLT has decided to go in a different direction with it doesn't mean that it doesn't have that potential. And we invite formulators to be creative. They may not be able to make the claims on pack, but in terms of functionality, that's super exciting stuff. You could take Nutricog, which is this ingredient for memory and focus and cognition and stuff, and you could give it to somebody with leaky gut and GI inflammation, and it would work beautifully for them for that use. But that's just not what we're studying it for.
Beautiful. I mean, there's so many different uses. Would you guys ever launch a separate ingredient where, hey, we see this goal, maybe let's tweak this sourcing, tweak the extract, and name it, leaky GI?
In the non-cognitive world,
I feel like we need to invite Ben and Mike into our innovation meetings, Jeremy.
We're definitely making a
we're making a case.
We're making a case for it right now.
Well, I mean, at some point it does get almost confusing, but I do know you outside of the cognitive space. I think you do have some similar ingredients that are marketed towards different niches or different demographics, really.
Yeah.
Like grip factors for muscle, but don't you have Strength Thera, which seems
same
similar?
ingredient?
It's the same
name.
ingredient, but for
and really that came about when we were offering Rip Factor to the market, and we went, it's gone through actually quite an evolution. Jeremy brought up dose response and trying to study these ingredients at different dose thresholds. A lot of that materialized based on commercial questions we had in the marketplace. But the other thing that we had is we were offering this ingredient and it was providing this vast array of benefits. We were getting a lot of questions from the market. Hey, can this work in an aging demographic? Can it work in women? A lot of your data was in men. We didn't even talk about that, but just the subjects that are basically used in a study, the age range, the gender. We at PLT spent a lot of time looking at that and building the studies that way. And that's what really birthed Strength Thera, this kind of, let's call it softer branding, because we wanted to see, hey, what's this going to look like in that aging population? We were getting questions, or can it provide this range of benefits with that new cohort? Can we pull in women? And that is how that came to be. And now we have branding, I guess, a breadth of branding that offers, whether you're a brand that's kind of softer in tone or marketing towards an older demographic, there's a branding alternative for you. If you're more intense, here's a brand and Rip Factor for you. So it really, that's sometimes the market helps to help guide us.
Yeah,
because at the end of the
absolutely.
day,
Especially
you need to be market facing. That's what we do.
yeah, and especially ingredients all have a life cycle, right? An ingredient might be introduced with a certain focus, and then as its life cycle continues, based on the responses we get from customers, we capture the voice of the customer and we carry it back into our innovation sessions, and we say, okay, this was our value proposition in 2017. Is it still right for us in 2020? And then you see this evolution, right? So we've got an ingredient, for example, that was initially marketed for weight management called Slendicor. Great research on it, and there were these other benefits that were starting to appear, right? And other potential mechanisms of action. It was thermogenic. We had animal data on it. We didn't have human data that was thermogenic. The blood lipids were improved. Triglycerides went down. Like a whole bunch of cardiometabolic benefits we knew about for this ingredient, but there wasn't at the time a discussion amongst consumers about cardiometabolic health. Now there is. And so we had an opportunity both to expand how we were studying it and also update the story of how we're talking about it. It's not just a weight loss ingredient. This is a cardiometabolic health ingredient. You know, these effects were always there, but how we choose to frame the narrative evolves over time, and it evolves in response to what our customers tell us they care about.
Excellent. I don't have first off, gentlemen, thank you so much. Like, I've had a blast.
Awesome.
You put me like further into team botanicals here without even trying, really. So I know that wasn't the goal, but like, I don't know. It just seems so much more interesting. So I guess, yeah, I don't have any other specific questions. I don't know if Ben does or not, but I would like to kind of know, like, what are next steps? So let's say someone else, a brand or formulator or someone else is listening, and they're like me, and they're like, dude, I got to try some of these botanicals out. Like, what's the next process? How do we get a hold of you? Can we get some of those Zembrin gummies? Like,
Yeah. Well, obviously, one of the great things you can do is definitely, I think we're going to be broadly available to meet with people at supply side later in the year, but you should definitely visit that website, www.plthealth.com. All of our brands are there. How do you take the next step? Reach out to us, request a sample, try it for yourselves, and that would be definitely the step. We love this kind of forum, being able to talk this way. We do the same kind of high energy conversations with our customers. Many of our customers stick with us for decades, so we love. This is kind of the beginning of something great. I'm totally. This is actually awesome, by the way.
Yeah, you two will definitely be welcome back, because you have so many ingredients. We have only covered like one niche mostly, so we can dive deeper into weight loss next time, or whatever we feel like doing for the next round. So,
I'm going to note
Ben,
here.
You got anything else?
I'm just going to note at the end of the podcast here, because if you've made it through to the end of here, congratulations. This has been a great conversation. But we're going to be using Zembrin in a fun collab drink for Supply Side West. So if you are an industry insider and you're going to be at Supply Side, if you come to the PLT booth and you're excited to try out Zembrin, we'll have an energy drink that contains 25 milligrams of it. Or you can just, I ordered on Amazon. Natural has a mint that has 25 milligrams of Zembrin, and I've been popping those things like twice a day. They taste awesome. They feel great. So I'm becoming like a natural affiliate here, but a lot of times we speak to both industry people, but also consumers who are early adopters. And I don't think PLT wants to send out, a kilo of Zembrin to some consumers, but I think there's a lot of places where they can get it on its own as well, which is great.
Love talking to consumers too. You know, and we get a lot of consumer feedback into us, even though we're B2B facing, but those are some of the best kinds of communications we get when people talk about this changed my life, or we again, we're talking about all these different solutions that we have with AppReflex, or the joint and cartilage health platform we have. There are people who are mobile now that can walk better, that can get up faster. It's just so many things. It just, when you can improve lives, then you're on to something, man. You're on to something.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah,
This
and
is awesome.
so yeah, in the show notes we'll have some links and everything. Are you busy on LinkedIn or Instagram or any other social media profiles we should
Yeah,
mention?
LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. We've got a Facebook page. You can check out all of our social. All those links are available on the website as well. But we're there and looking forward to engaging.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.